Hello, welcome to ZIM Capture number 5. ZIM is an open source library to help you code interactive media on the canvas, and it piggybacks on CreateJS, an amazing open source library that helps us do that too. You can get to ZIM at zimjs.com, and so let's go there now, zimjs.com. What we're going to concentrate on today is the documentation. In the last captures, we took a look at the basics, the learn section, the news section, and then we brought you through the frame area, which gives you a template to get coding. But if we want to find out what we can do with our coding, an excellent place to sort of recognize or see all of the commands and classes, etc., is the docs. Now, to see them in action, ZIM Bits is there as well, and perhaps in a future capture we'll take you through ZIM Bits again. We certainly did that when we looked at the Learn column, so that would have been ZIM Capture number 2. Took you through some of those bits. But let's go into the docs and see more specifically the features and what we have available to us in ZIM. Well, I just thought there is a feature section as well, so if we were to open up that, like this is verbally telling you the features as well, and so we can now look into the documentation and see more details on all of these features. So let's do that. Docs. Here are the ZIM docs. Let's make that a little bit bigger. And there's a link up top that goes off to the ZIM code. As a matter of fact, that doesn't go to ZIM 3.03 directly because that would be a minified file, but it actually goes to the ZIM 303_docs file. So if I press on that, here is the ZIM minified. Now, if you were to open this up in something that had line numbers, you would, sorry about that. If we open that up in something that had line numbers, we would be able to correlate the line numbers here in the documentation. Okay, you see these numbers in our documentation. That means that on line 350, you can look at the merge function. Okay. This is the docs, and now it's broken down into modules. Here's ZIM Distill. I'll just take you over them briefly. ZIM Distill, ZIM Wrap, ZIM Code, ZIM Create, ZIM Build, whoops, and ZIM Pages, and ZIM Frame at the very bottom. We just talked about the frame. If you ever wanted to see more information about frame, you could go to the documentation, expand this, and inside is all the details. Each one, since we've opened this up, I'll just mention it. First of all, the signature is here at the beginning. There it is. And it tells you what we've got, if it extends something, how to use it just briefly. We say, hey, give me a new frame and pass in parameters. And it tells you briefly what it does, followed by what the parameters mean that you're passing inside there. It also had rollover, touch, scroll top, align, v-align, and canvas ID. Those are still parameters. Properties of it. So what properties can you get? What methods can you use? Remake canvas, load assets, etc. And what events it's going to be able to trigger. This, by the way, is directly from the ZIM code. So in the ZIM code, each class has above it this information, and I've made it so that I can dynamically pull all of the information there in the code into the documentation. So it's a pretty easy system. Now I'll close that. Scrolling right back up, let's start over again. At the very top. Now, at the very top is ZIM Distill. Now, ZIM Distill isn't necessarily the best place to start talking about documentation. It's kind of meta. It helps us. We can just go over it briefly, may as well. ZIM Distill helps us make a version of ZIM, a minified version of ZIM that has only the functions and classes that you are using in your application. Okay, so you would set ZIM Distill to true at the top, And then when you're happy that you've run your application, you would then call ZIM distill the function right here, ZIM distill. And that will give you a set of numbers that represent the functions that are being used, and you pass that into the ZIM distill site. So all that I introduced actually in the news section, so that was a couple captures ago. So that's ZIM distill. It's sort of meta. It's just helping you get a smaller version of ZIM. All right, now we move into ZIM proper, we'll call it, and we start off with the ZIM wrap. ZIM wrap is a series of global functions, so you can use those just directly, ZOG, that usually just wrap some sort of functionality. So in the case of ZOG, we are wrapping console.log. So we actually bind the console.log, and that is a short form for the console.log. Now that worked properly. It was actually pretty tricky to do. And the reason why it was tricky is you have to bind it so that you end up getting the information shown in the console, such as what line you're on and what file you're on. Now, there's a bit of an issue in the last 2 or 3 versions of Mozilla, 36 and 35 or something like that, where for some reason the binding is not giving that information. But in all the other browsers, it does give the file name and line location. Currently, in the latest versions of Mozilla, it's not. So I filed a bug, and they worked hard on that. Boy, have they ever worked hard on that. You can't believe it. It's like 6 of them talking code like you would not believe to be able to bring that back again. And I think they're almost there. So they're definitely wanting to do that. They've been on it like hotcakes over the last week or 2. So that should be back again. But that's the binding of the console.log. Here's ZID. ZID is a shortened version of document.getElementById. So I hate using document.getElementById. And so here we can shorten that if we want. Obviously, that's not even really for the Canvas side as much so as it would be for traditional HTML. So some of these are for traditional HTML. In other words, there are shortcuts in JavaScript that I've been using for a long time because I'm tired of using document.getElementById. It's nice, obviously, if you're using jQuery, you can just use the $ selector. By the way, we have something like the $ selector right here is ZET, and that's you can put any selectors in, and that's like setting things. So once you've got a selector, then you can set properties and stuff like that. So ZSS is just a binding of document.getElementById and some ID followed by .style. So if you want, you can just go ZSS logo.top, and you don't need to put the .style in there, equals 10 pixels. Zgo is a quick way to get to a URL. ZUM is a quick way to turn one of those stupid things with pixels on the end. 10 pixels now would be converted to 10, so it just takes off whatever unit you have on the end of that. Zot, it was a quick way to do not, but that's because I could never quite remember. We've got to check to make sure that parameters are either there or not there to be able to set defaults. And initially I thought it was a more complex thing. Now I know you just sort of set it, make it not equal. If it's not equal to null, then something's there, and that handles things. But it was always tricky for me to remember that, so I made my own version of it, or our own version now. If you're using ZIM, you can just use Zot. ZOP and ZIL are related to stopping propagation, and I can't remember what ZIL does. What does ZIL do? Stops keys from moving content. Okay, so it keeps it still. And now I've given you little one words on the rest, so this is where these Z words came from. ZOP comes from stop, ZIL comes from still, ZET comes from set, ZOB comes from object. Now, ZOB's kind of a fun one. I use it internally in ZIM. This handles passing in a parameter either as a bunch of parameters or as a single parameter object. So if we open this up, it's a bit more complex. So it's what ZIM Duo provided was all about. So let's see, here's a function test with parameters A, B, C, and we might want to run test and go 1, null, and 3. So you see we have to insert the null there. Hang on, let me just make this a bit bigger. We've got to insert the null there, which can be annoying, especially if there's a lot of parameters. If you're going like to the 8th parameter, it's a pain to go 1, null, 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 3. So ZOB is a way that I've set it up so that you can pass in a configuration object. As a matter of fact, you also are welcome to use ZOB as a technique for your own classes. If you make more custom classes, then you can use ZOB to allow the same thing. So now we can pass in an object parameter saying A is 1, C is 3, and no mention at all about B in the middle. Okay, and that gets left off. Which means like you could leave off 10 of these parameters and just you get the 2 that you want. So that's what that's all about. And you can read about that on the blog, and it's the prime feature of ZIM Duo. Okay, so that's the ZOB functionality there, and that's an introduction to ZIM wrap. ZIM code, I'm not going to go through each of these, but ZIM code is broken into 2 sections. As a matter of fact, it used to be 2 different modules, and then I decided to bring it into 1 module. It's general coding, such as shuffling and getting random numbers and copying arrays and stuff, damping and proportion damping, and so forth. It's general functions, and then it moves into about here, it moves into specific to XML, HTML to get things like the scroll X, the window width, setting cookies and deleting cookies. So the second part of code is specific stuff to help us with traditional DOM or HTML side primarily. It also checks to see if they're on mobile, and the last one within code is kind of cool. That's async, which allows you right from ZIM to handle AJAX, or it's actually JSON-P. So take a look at that if you're interested in that type of thing. We bypass quickly damp, proportion, and proportion damp here. Those I use quite a lot for things, so they're exciting. Open those up. That's a way that you don't have to remember the damping formula every time or the proportion formula. It just sort of wraps that, makes it easier. And a dictionary, even if you want a dictionary, if you know what that is from other languages. JavaScript doesn't have one, and now it does, I suppose. Okay, so that's the code section. Once again, you open up any of those and it talks about what they do. ZIM Create is a module that uses CreateJS. So this module is primarily functions that use CreateJS, whereas the build module is primarily classes, so objects that you can make, and also uses CreateJS. So ZIM Create has a ticker in it, and this, as it says, wraps the CreateJS ticker. CreateJS has a ticker as well. Now, a couple different sort of scenarios like Box2D or 3JS, these tend to run, in a sense, one ticker, one update, and down at the bottom, and one update, and it's just constantly updating your code. That's not a bad way to do it. It means that there's one stage draw at the end of your update, and so be it, and it's probably in an animation frame. But CreateJS, its ticker, we don't have that. We can manually set that up, and you're certainly welcome to do that. Make one single CreateJS ticker with a stage.update in it and leave it at that. If you were to do that, that ticker is going all the time, and that might take battery. I'm not sure totally of the inners of that, but I think it probably would. So we have it so that we're supposed to really add a ticker when we need it and remove the ticker when we don't. Well, what I've got is, as long as there's a function that requires a ticker, you can add that function to a ZIM ticker with just with the add method. So here are the adds. There's the add method. And then all those functions get added, but at the end of the ticker call, it updates a stage. So we know that regardless, like if we run 3 different animations and something else needs an update, those won't individually update the stage, each of them individually updating the stage, which causes slowdown, especially on mobile. So I think ZIM ticker is a little bit safer in that way, and there's a couple other neat features you can do too. Now, if you wanted this ticker that runs always, there's you can run the always function right on the ticker. Now, I did run into a bit of a problem that I noticed when I made the ZIM site. The ZIM site has 2 canvases on it. And the stage.updates are a little bit tricky in that regard. My ticker was really made for only 1 stage, and then I realized that. And so now that's been improved to handle multiple stages. Unfortunately, it does mean that for things like always and even the add, you have to say which stage you're adding it to. So, you know, one little extra thing that I sometimes forget. If you do forget and it's not working, in the console, as long as you've got the ZON turned on, in the console, you'll get a little message saying, hey, you got to add the stage to that, you know. So you might want to look out for that. Okay, so like I said, I'm just trying to go through the documentation. It may be that I've even got another capture specifically on the ticker because it's fairly important, also a little bit tricky. So I don't want to go into too much detail there, but yeah, really wanting to go through how to use the documentation and where things are at in it. But I'll highlight a few things. This is talking about dragging. Dragging is one of my favorite things in ZIM, so there's a fair bit that you can do when you drag, so take a look there. Also hit tests, very important for interactive media, the various types of hit tests, so that's found here in the Create module, and you can read about those. Scaling, moving and animating. A few helper functions that work with CreateJS. Outline is really neat so that you can outline any of your objects temporarily. This is sort of like a debugging mode. You can outline any of your objects, and it also shows you the registration point, the origin, and a bounding box. Okay, because sometimes it can get a bit tricky using that stuff. ZIM outline, by the way, is a one-off. As soon as you call outline, it outlines it at that time, but it doesn't continue to animate with something. It just shows it when you call it. Various centering. Placing was a neat thing that was added, a helper function as well that you would use while you're creating. If you want to know where you're putting something, if you run place and drag it around, it will tell you the X and Y. Then you can use that X and Y in your final, production, comment out the place. And it's just a way to be able to place something, find out its X and Y rather than guessing at the X and Y constantly. I do have a ZIM grid and guide. Those are set up in the pages module down below. So that also, helps you with that kind of stuff. Expanding will open the hit area on it. It just sort of piggybacks on the hit area in CreateJS. And then masking as well. So some more functions that relate to CreateJS. We do have a mask in CreateJS, but they don't work with the ZIM rectangle, triangle, and circle. So I had to make a specific ZIM mask that works with those ones. Okay, getting into the build section. Build is basically it's a bunch of components, but also shapes. So these are objects that exist that we can usually in general see, aside from maybe the parallax and even that you can see. So these are a set of components, but also a few shapes up top. And I think they're pretty self-explanatory. Labels, buttons, checkboxes, and so forth. And here's where, we really get into documentation helps to know how you use that, what kind of events. Most of them have change events, and you just open that up and you can see that, well, this is a button. It does not have a change event. It's just got your traditional click or click and that kind of stuff. But anyway, most of these other ones, sliders, dials, tabs, etc., have change events. There's a couple constants up top here, optimize and action event, and they relate primarily to the things in ZIM build, so I put them in the ZIM build. Optimize helps you make it so that these components do not update the stage, because quite often, so if you set optimize to true, none of the components will update the stage. If you think about it, usually when you use a component like a slider, you're going to be changing something in the event code. Like when that slider changes, you're most likely updating the stage yourself after you make a change. So I don't really want the component to update the stage and then you make a change and then what you've changed updates the stage. That's an extra update. So optimize pulls those off. The one drawback of optimize in that case is if you've got optimize to true and you've got tabs on the screen, you'll be hitting these tabs, and if you just throw the tabs on the screen, that's it. Normally the tabs would work, but if you've optimized true, though, you won't even see any updates on those tabs. Yeah, you'll have to wait until you actually are making those tabs do something, which then update. So by default, optimize is set to false, just so that new people coming in can use these components and see them working, which is a nice thing. Okay, action event is, I found that there's a delay on mobile when you press a button, say, because it's on a mouse down, sorry, not on a mouse down, but on a click. So clicks are mouse down, mouse ups. If we want to see instant activation, then really we might want to turn to a mouse down. So now all the components run on mouse down, but if you don't want that, if you really want the click, the full down and up to activate, then you can change the action event to a click. Okay, so that's a global constant for you to, well, not quite global, within ZIM, it's global, that you can set. So that's a build module. It ends with parallax and scrollers, which aren't really components. A scroller is a background image that animates, and a parallax gives you the parallax effect. But those are in there. All these are components. ZIM pages. ZIM pages is the sort of the last main module, aside from frame, I suppose, but ZIM pages, it helps you with mobile. It gives you swiping. It lets you set up multiple pages, which can be used for non-mobile as well. Same with hotspots. There's a guide and a grid that helps you do layouts. There's also a layout class, which really does layouts in various regions that you can do. So I will take you through lots of that stuff in another capture, but that's where all the sort of more advanced things for mobile are. Finally, within pages is Wonder. I threw it in pages because it's keeping track of stats for pages and other things, clicks and stuff, and I just, well, whatever, I'll throw it in pages. So ZIM Wonder's in there. It's a little bit different, but there she be. A Wonder, yeah, keeps track of stats, and we talked about that in the capture number 3, I believe, when we were going over the news. Finally, ZIM Frame is there, and here's your documentations. Okay, so our documentation. Let's leave it at that. Thank you very much. I'm Inventor Dan Zen, and we will return with another capture. We'll start looking more specifically into these various items. Have a great day. Woohoo! Ciao.